Hello, and welcome to episode 10 of USA Battle Royale. Unfortunately, the series will not be ending today, although actually it might, who knows. I doubt it though, because it doesn't look like the series is that close to ending. Although we are getting closer and closer, I doubt we'll reach episode 20. But anyways, let's get right into it. Oregon will be invading Southeast. So the state to the southeast of Oregon, I would say, is probably California. And so this is kind of like a test. I don't know why. I feel like test is the right word. The Teal Alliance really wants to see if California or if the other Pink Alliance countries will come to the defense of California if California actually gets invaded. Because if they do, they're just going to immediately withdraw and give up a bit of land to ensure that they remain mostly intact. But if they don't, then they're going to invade into California and force them to give up a bit of land, basically to just prove to all of the states that the Pink Alliance does absolutely nothing for you. So they invade into the Pink Alliance. Oregon starts by invading Southeast because it allows Idaho to help them out. And they're invading into the parts of California they don't think matter to California. And California obviously calls on the Pink Alliance to help them. And surprisingly, Colorado actually agrees to help. And they start invading into Idaho. But then Idaho offers to give them Wyoming to leave the war. And just like that, Colorado basically leaves the war. They're still part of the Pink Alliance. They're just not helping anyone out. Arizona also helps out California a little bit, but they're not going to be enough to stop this. California on their own is probably roughly equally strong as these four states plus Alaska and Hawaii, so they're going to be able to hold them off. But they also, in their plan for defending against these guys, had the Pink Alliance helping out. And now that the Pink Alliance isn't helping out, and that they expected them to be invading over here, and they're invading over here, California's being thrown for a loop. They kind of liked plans, and this was not part of their plan. And so eventually they get their act together, and they start slowly invading back before Oregon and Idaho actually do launch their invasion here, which California had planned for, so they are able to stop it before it becomes too bad. But now the front line is pretty long, and this war will basically get stalemated here, so we're actually going to do something I think I've done in a different video, and we're going to do another event before we come back to this to see what the outcome of this war is. Washington will be invading Northwest. Okay, so I did not plan for this to happen, obviously. Washington, I think the most sensible thing that happens, I think the most sensible way to logic through this happening is that Alaska basically gets into a fight with Hawaii. They no longer like each other, and eventually Alaska ends up leaving the Teal Alliance because of that. And shortly afterwards, Washington starts sending troops up into Alaska's panhandle over here to start showing them that they should have cared about that. And I think Alaska would probably just chicken out of this situation, if I'm being honest, and just give up their panhandle to Washington. So that's what's going to happen. However, that diversion caused by Alaska leaving that Washington felt so strongly it needed to stop from happening right now does allow California to have a breakthrough and start coalescing its troops over here towards pushing back against Oregon, almost invading into proper Oregonian territory. And so things are starting to go a bit better for California, but unfortunately the war still is getting stalemated, and a clever play by a general from Idaho allows for this front line to be pushed back a little bit. So California pushed back the front line significantly, but the war is still stalemating. That event wasn't enough to change up the course of the war. Wisconsin will invade Southwest. So the state to the southwest of Wisconsin is Iowa. And what happened here is actually interesting. Wisconsin wanted to create an alliance with Iowa against the Pink Alliance, but Iowa refused, and it looked like Iowa was even considering joining the Pink Alliance, even though it doesn't actually do anything. And Wisconsin really didn't want that to happen, so they just started invading Iowa to prevent Iowa from being able to do anything, because Iowa's government kind of gets locked into war and isn't really able to execute on joining any alliances or anything right now. The Pink Alliance, obviously, with deference to Iowa, refuses to invade Iowa. Or they also refuse to invade Wisconsin for separate reasons for each of them. So Colorado doesn't want to invade Wisconsin because of the thing that just happened on their western border. They are kind of worried about the Teal Alliance trying to invade them. So even though they made peace with them for now, they don't really want to focus on the east. They want to have peace in the east. Um, Meanwhile, Ohio, West Virginia is kind of starting to have very bad relations with Virginia. And while this war is happening, it was in the middle of doing a stunt to move its troops next to Virginia. Texas doesn't border Wisconsin, and it doesn't feel like actually helping Iowa, so it doesn't want to do that. Okay, back to this war. Wisconsin is continuing to invade into Iowa, and Wisconsin is significantly stronger than Iowa because Iowa had to like limit their army size after the war in exchange for being allowed to exist. And so Wisconsin will kind of just push their way into the center and the heartland of Iowa, and Iowa will realize that the best thing they can do is just surrender to Wisconsin right now, give up as much land as they need to, and just hope that everything works out in the end. Maybe they'll be able to join the Pink Alliance. And so that's what they agree to. And as you can see, Wisconsin got significantly more powerful, and Iowa does indeed join the Pink Alliance. Unfortunately, this war doesn't have a major effect on the other war. However, California is continuing to have the edge in this war, using their navy to land troops on the border between them and Oregon, so that these troops have to withdraw from the coast in order to have a better front line. And what that ends up doing is it drastically worsens Oregon's navy because they have to withdraw from here, and California destroys a large portion of it. And that allows for California to make a few more naval landings over here. Unfortunately for them, Washington drives out these troops, but these troops are going to have a nuisance in Oregon's side for a while. Let's do another event. Washington will invade Southwest. I think I'm gonna just give a lot of context to this before it happens because I really think that the most sensible way for this to happen is gonna take a little bit of explaining to do. So basically, California is able to take the entire coast of Oregon, and Oregon's government starts to get extremely panicked because most of the important parts of the state, including Portland now, are under Californian control. And so Oregon, in a panic, decides to surrender to California, and California ensures the surrender is going to be pretty bad for them. However, they make an intelligent decision. So, first of all, California takes a good chunk of Oregon. Second of all, Oregonian troops are forced to withdraw from here. Californian troops withdraw from Oregon. However, the main thing that happens is Oregon is given a new government that is aligned with California. So, I mean, this is a huge break for California, but now we actually do the event, which is Washington invading Southwest. So, it starts over here, and of course, the people of Oregon are pretty happy about being invaded by Washington, whereas California is basically moving occupying troops into Oregon. And so, while Idaho does withdraw from here to make their front lines a bit more stable, they're also just invading into California over here, being pretty happy about it. Washington will start another front into Oregon. This is actually partially territory that used to be part of Washington and partially territory that used to be part of Idaho. So, although it was a long time ago, a lot of the people there are not very upset. And so, again, Washington doesn't really have to use occupying forces as much until they start getting into the Californian territory, although they're still in mostly territory that was at some point part of Oregon. Oregon's new government, which I don't know where its capital would be. It definitely wouldn't be in Salem anymore. But wherever it is, we'll say it's like around here. It starts facing a rebellion, and the new government has to flee. And this allows for basically the new Oregon government to collapse, and California basically has to take over for defending the new Oregon government. So it does give them a huge frontline bonus, and they're still way ahead of where they were before the collapse of Oregon, but it's not as bad as it used to be. And Colorado is still doing absolutely nothing because they kind of want California to be weakened. Like, I didn't specify this before, but they know that the Pink Alliance is not going to last forever, and they want California to be weakened. So that if they ever go to war with California, they will be the winner. New York is invading Northeast. So, New York is really upset about having lost the last war. They're really the only state that lost the last war and was fully part of the Orange Alliance through and through. So, they're really upset about it. And they want to kind of get their glory back by reuniting with Maine and kind of freeing the Mainer people from this government with a different oppressive government. So, they start invading Northeast into Maine, and they're actually doing really well because Maine's new government was set up extremely badly just so that they couldn't rebel from Virginia. The problem is that Virginia borders New York, so Ohio, West Virginia, and Virginia hate each other, if you'll remember. So Ohio, West Virginia is definitely not going to help out. They might even try and impede Virginia. But Virginia is going to start an invasion into New York, and they actually capture New York City very quickly because New York wasn't allowed to defend New York City as part of the peace treaty, as well as taking all of Long Island. And pretty quickly, New York decides to withdraw from the southern parts of Maine, and things are not going well for them. And in a surprising turn of events, just because of how badly New York is doing, Ohio, West Virginia will join in separately from West Virginia. They're officially still part of the Pink Alliance. I just wanted to show you which lands are conquered by which power. But anyway, New York will start being invaded by Ohio, West Virginia, who aims to capture the northern parts of New York and also maybe some of the southern parts of New York. And they are invading even more quickly than Virginia is. As Virginia kind of stops invading, realizing they're probably fine, Maine recaptures all of its territory, and Ohio, West Virginia captures the rest of New York. But now they're going to have to try and have a peace treaty between them where they divide up the land in a way that both of them can agree on, and they kind of hate each other right now. So, although Ohio, West Virginia is in the Pink Alliance, this might not be pretty. And this is the result of that peace treaty. New York is finally out. So, New York City and Long Island have been given to Virginia, and Maine got the rest of downstate New York, whereas upstate New York was given to Ohio, West Virginia. This took a lot of arguing between them to get to, and they are very close to going to war with each other, which would mean one of them would have to leave the Pink Alliance first, because the only thing the Pink Alliance officially requires you to do is not attack each other. So that might happen soon. Over here, what's essentially a war between two members of the Pink Alliance does actually affect the war. And what it does is Arizona doesn't leave the Pink Alliance, but they stop aiding California. And you might think that was small, and it was. They weren't really helping California out. But there was a small contingent of Arizonan troops right over here that once they received the orders that they're allowed to come back, basically just flee their posts, which they weren't supposed to do. But also, Arizona didn't really give them clear orders and was kind of okay with it, and they didn't get punished for it. And it allows for a massive breakthrough to happen over here that leads to almost the entire rest of Oregon getting retaken. And a new government of Oregon is set up by the Teal Alliance, which is basically the old government of Oregon that California had destroyed. So now the front lines look like this, with Oregon being back, but still having lost land to California. And the war is still ongoing. And at this point, California is kind of embarrassed by the fact that they can't deal with this alliance. Like, sure, this alliance is probably a bit more powerful than them when they're just on their own, but they expected the Pink Alliance to help out, and the Pink Alliance has done actually nothing. Colorado really likes that California and the Teal Alliance are both being weakened by this war because it'll allow them to pick over the leftovers afterwards, so they're just doing nothing. Arizona doesn't really want to help out California because they kind of see that the Pink Alliance is not really out for helping the smaller states in it. And the other states are just too far away from California to care or even really be able to help in an efficient manner. Hawaii makes a landing in Southern California to try and threaten LA. They don't want to land at LA because they know it's going to be way too defended, so they land over here and start marching their way south. California has a lot of troops already defending this area. That's part of the reason they weren't winning up here is because they wanted to defend their main area just in case a naval invasion happened, and it did. So they're able to push this back until they get to the port city that Hawaii landed on and had captured, where California is literally just struggling to take it for like a long time. However, that didn't hinder California in the north at all because they didn't have to pull any troops from there. So that's actually a strategic victory for California. Let's do another event though. Iowa will face a rebellion. Poor Iowa. They've just been getting destroyed this video. And obviously the Pink Alliance is not going to help them with this rebellion. Now this rebellion is not going to be a rebellion that's seeking to separate from Iowa. It's a rebellion that's seeking to overthrow the government of Iowa. Because as much as I call it Iowa, it's like 80% of its population is probably people who are from Missouri. So this is really just a group of people who don't like Iowa's government, don't want to join the Pink Alliance, don't really like that Iowa, the way Iowa fought the war with Wisconsin. They don't like anything about this government, and they want a new thing. And these rebels will start on the border with Wisconsin. Wisconsin is not supplying them at all. In fact, Wisconsin doesn't really like them because they kind of are hostile to Wisconsin. But they do start on the border with Wisconsin because of their hostility towards Wisconsin. However, their message starts to spread, and other regions throughout the state start to like the rebellion. So this massive region in the south will join it, and quickly Iowa is losing land, and their main government realizes there's just no point. So they decide to make concessions to the rebellion. And their government does get cut in half, so that's something. And then a major event happens, which is that Iowa gets kicked out. After making concessions to the rebellion, Iowa gets kicked out of the Pink Alliance, who didn't want them to do that. And then, amazingly, and I'm going to make the rebellion red for this, Iowa begins to get invaded by the Pink Alliance, who partially just wants their land, so it's, like, understandable, and they are invading into the rebellion as well, because they don't like the rebellion. So, in case you were hoping the Iowan Rebellion would win this war somehow, it's not, but it is also invading into territory that it didn't have when the Pink Alliance started invading. So Iowa is just in a total mess right now, and if that wasn't crazy enough, Wisconsin will fourth party, wanting to just get some of the territory for themselves, and so they'll start invading to the areas where the rebellion first began, officially to help Iowa quell the rebellion, but it's pretty obvious that's not the reason it's doing that. Colorado will reluctantly move some troops here, but they're not moving enough of their army here to make actually that big of a dent because they're really worried about the West. But they want to help out the Pink Alliance and they want to get some land since they know Iowa's being divided up anyway. Texas is moving some troops in here. Illinois is moving, or that's not Illinois, that's Ohio, West Virginia, is moving some troops in here. And Wisconsin is also moving some troops. And the fact that the rebellion is still trying to fight the main government while they're also losing to the Pink Alliance and to Wisconsin is not going to do well for the rebellion, as the rebellion kind of fully just gets screwed over. And the rest of the state is taken by Wisconsin because Colorado just refuses to invade any further. And Wisconsin and the Pink Alliance will now divide up Iowa. And this is what the borders of what used to be Iowa look like now. Going back to California, the Teal Alliance is finally getting its act together and is invading into California a lot. And it looks like Colorado might or might not starting to be supplying the Teal Alliance, which is against the Pink Alliance's code. And California is kind of also the unofficial leader of the Pink Alliance. So both of these things lead to California basically asking the Pink Alliance to vote whether they think Colorado should be kicked out. And Arizona thinks that Colorado should be kicked out. Texas thinks they shouldn't be. Ohio, West Virginia thinks they shouldn't be. And Virginia and Maine think they should be. Colorado obviously says they shouldn't be. But unfortunately for Colorado, there are enough votes to get them kicked out. So they are no longer part of the Pink Alliance. As for these guys, they finally just decided to draw up a border between them because they realize it's kind of getting insane how long this war has been longer than the Green-Orange War from episode 5, which was the previous longest war in the series, and they just don't want to fight anymore. California will cede Oregon the rest of their land, and other than that, there are no border changes, which means that basically no border changes happened since the start of this conflict over here. However, something is about to happen. Let's do one more event first, actually. Wisconsin will join in an alliance with Maine. So Wisconsin is finally going to create that alliance they've been wanting to create, that they tried to create with Iowa. They finally found another state willing to join it, and that state is Virginia, but obviously Maine is going to do whatever Virginia does. This is the reason I had them in green before, because it is going to be a green alliance, and Maine and Virginia are going to both join the alliance. Unfortunately, they don't get any other states to join the alliance, as Colorado, who they were hoping after leaving the Pink Alliance would join the Green Alliance, abuses the rule that no states east of Colorado are allowed to join the Teal Alliance. And I bet you know where this is going. They really want California. They want all of California's territory. They think that's the last thing they need to take over the country. And so, because no states east of them are allowed to join the Teal Alliance, well, they're not east of themselves, so Colorado joins the Teal Alliance. And with that, I think we'll end episode 10. Comment down below which state you think is going to win. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.